Hello, welcome to this week's Back to the City. I'm Simon Calder, and today I'm very happy to be joined by ANASTAZIA ACKER. Welcome.
Thank you.
You just put out the record Graveyard.
Yes.
And it was, I think, on Halloween weekends. Very appropriate, of course.
Tried to.
The final track on the record, The Graveyard Shift, I think is a really interesting song. So I'm looking forward to taking a journey through the record and culminating in that. According to the one sheet, Graveyard delves into the depths of loss and paints a picture of the human journey through grief and moving into a space of newness. So the first thing that really struck me, guided by that description as I was listening through the record for the first few times, is that there are a few instances where we seem to have lost something, or something has been taken away from us, and yet the general trajectory, I feel, is one of empowerment and working through, as opposed to pushing the feelings aside. So in the opening track, Adore Me, I gave you my autonomy. That's the lyric that kind of struck out. And then there's a similar sense of loss in past tense. He stole my faith. So my opening, big question, I suppose, is, do you feel that the record both mourns the loss of certain things, autonomy, faith, and yet also perhaps documents the discovery or the rebirth of a different type of autonomy, or faith in something other than what one originally had faith in?
Yeah, I mean, the record started as this idea of I was going through a space of life where I just loss was kind of the key element. Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff that I wrote was over a time where I decided to step away from certain relationships that just weren't healthy anymore. And then both Adore Me and Past Tense were about the loss of a 6-year-long relationship. And I think more so in those songs, the talk about I gave you my autonomy, it was I was looking back, I was 17 when I got into that relationship, and I just so wanted to fit this mold of the person that they wanted me to be, that just, I was okay with that's fine, we can shove that part of me away. We don't have to talk about the part of me you don't like, and I'll just be this.
I'll be this other thing for you now.
I'll be this blueprint of what I think you want me to be. And then trying to fit the mold that he would like, that his friends would like.
Yep, and the lack of reciprocity kind of comes through in, is it Ghost Town? You loved me just now when your friends were around.
Yes.
So there's this sense of, if on the one hand, I am contorting myself to be what I feel the other person wants, on the other hand, the other person is acting in different ways towards me depending on who else is present.
Yes.
So what could you say a little bit about the process of composing these songs and crafting the record? Obviously, the sense of self that's involved when one is artfully doing that is quite different from that which relates to the time that's being reflected on.
Yeah.
And I think especially with the song Adore Me, it's got a very interesting structure. Is it the chorus that begins, forever young, you'll stay to me? But the first time it comes, it's kind of shorter. And then the second time we get to the chorus, it's 3 units instead of 2. And the third unit is slotted into the center. That's a really interesting formal feature of it. So you were artfully crafting this thing. Again, the stark contrast with trying to be what one assumes someone else wants one to be. Do you have any thoughts about the process of crafting the record?
Wish I could take credit for that part of the chorus. That was a song that I brought in to work on with some other writers. And I will say that song started out really messy. Like it was just almost like a word dump vomit. I think it was one of the first songs I wrote post breakup. So this song, I mean, it was written back in 2020.
Yep.
And then it kind of got put to the wayside with everything. But I really wanted kind of it to feel like a spiral almost.
The sense of spiraling.
Yeah.
The surrendering control, and as though perhaps that will lead to growth and empowerment. It doesn't feel like that initially. It feels like a spiral, like a downward
And just
spiral.
like when you get out of relationships right away, you're trying to like justify what happened and always look for the good, and then it always just comes back around to like, this was not a good thing.
Right. Yes, exactly. When you were saying about the kind of word dump, the original early draft of the song, are you familiar with Julia Cameron, the Artist's Way, and Morning Pages on the one hand, or Brené Brown encourages us to write shitty first drafts?
I've never put a name to it, but I have heard the like burn your lovelies kind of thing, where like write it, delete it, rewrite it.
Exactly. Yeah, because you get something then and you have material to work with.
Yeah.
So could you expand a little bit on the process of having all of this raw material in a song that to you initially, when you first get it down, it seems kind of messy, but then it gets crafted into the opening track on the record. Could you talk a little bit about that process, and were you working with others during that crafting phase?
Yeah, so that was a song, I word vomited it. I did like a crappy demo on my phone, and I was at the time working with Owen Satori and Davide Riso out of F5 Soundhouse, and they are two writers who are just phenomenal writers, and I have a lot of trust in them.
Yes.
And with them, they were kind of the first people I went to when I started like actually doing music. So by the time I brought that song, like I just was kind of like, they liked it, and really I had a lot of trust there. So that's kind of how that got crafted.
Although at the beginning, it's acknowledged that the partner or the person that the breakup is happening with has been lying to their friends, as we kind of briefly talked about that already. By the end of the song, lie to yourself, but don't lie to me. That's a really interesting twist. Obviously, humans lie to themselves all the time in our effort to make sense of reality. The fact that this opening track ends on that note, I think prepares the listener for the rest of the record, because the you that we meet over the course of this song is self-aware, reflecting on like your patterns, interpersonal patterns, and committed to lying to yourself less than you would be if you didn't have that commitment, essentially. So the message there at the end seems to me like, you do you. If you feel comfortable just lying to other people and to yourself all the time, you do you. But I am going to stay clear-sighted, and again, this process of like the work, get stuff down on the page and then refine those materials. I think that is a way that as songwriters we get to refine this like clearing of perception, refining of perception. Lie to yourself, but don't lie to me. I'm committed to seeing and telling the truth.
I would say that I try to be very brutally honest in my writing about situations, about myself. I mean, in Kind of a Mess, that song that's on here, I'm very brutal about who I am in that song.
That's another one that I really like.
So I would say that's kind of like the cornerstone of where I come from when I write. Because, I mean, very rarely do I write from a non-autobiographical perspective. So I think being honest in my writing is very key to making sure it's authentic.
Yeah, I gotta confess, I might be a mess. But then by the end, I'm kind of your mess. That's another nice twist. Because the acceptance of, I've referred to Brené Brown before, like the idea of the gifts of imperfection. yes, this is messy, and I own it, and I am willing to share this mess with you, all the more so if you clear-sightedly see me as I am and don't project a bunch of stuff on me. It's celebrating being a mess and being accepted by oneself and others as a mess. What other thoughts do you have about that particular song?
Kind of a mess?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites off of the record. That's one that Michael sent me the track for and was like, if you have any lyric ideas for this. And kind of just came, that song, I really just wanted to kind of capture that like falling in love again for the first time and just like it feeling so chaotic.
Yeah.
But like, I'm a messy person. I think I'm always going to be a little messy. And just like having someone who embraces that along the way.
The way you break me down is a little bit alarming is a favorite lyric of mine that I think relates to what you were just saying. Leonard Cohen says, you know, there's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in. So again, the idea of the gifts of imperfection, not resisting awareness of like where one doesn't fit the mold. We were talking before about acting the role that we might expect someone to want us to play. When we're aware, okay, I have this crack that makes me unable to do that, but it makes me a lot more interesting. and there's something very, again, the growth can happen when we don't put so much energy into like covering up this crack, which is perhaps the most idiosyncratic thing about me in the first place. I really like the bass on that song too. So you were saying that the lyrics were the last thing to come.
Yes.
With that one.
So Michael he just sent me the track of it.
Yeah.
And then I wrote the lyrics for it. So I can't take credit for any of the musical elements on this song, just the lyric ones. But
it really fits, doesn't it? And I think that there's something confident about how the song sounds, and particularly the bass, I think. It seems quite life-affirming. So, I really like that you choose to celebrate being a mess to the soundtrack of that instrumentation. Were there other songs that on this record that evolved in the same way, where you come in and you kind of mold the lyrics and the vocals to the soundscape?
Yeah, Crowded Room was the same way.
Okay.
That was another one where Michael was like, here's a track, have fun with it. And we got that song.
The percussion is interesting in that one. I think right before the segment, you play on repeat in my mind Rent Free, which is I like the metaphor of being aware. Again, the self-awareness, we don't want to be lying to ourselves. We're aware that we're constructing fictions and stories all the time, particularly maybe after an upheaval like a breakup. We find ourselves, if we're mindful enough, we catch ourselves in the act of like fabricating these stories and everything. And then we find the guy is hanging out rent-free. Being aware that that's what's happening is, I think, a first stage in evicting.
Yeah, and I mean, in the case of Crowded Room, it was kind of like the first steps into a new relationship. So that was like when you're starting to see someone new and you're like, I cannot tell my friends, like we need to keep this because I have such a track record, like we just need to ignore it, it'll go away. And then it does not go away.
Yeah, because it's exciting. So that Crowded Room is capturing the excitement of the new thing.
Yeah.
And the thing that's so new, it's not official yet.
Exactly.
That's what the premise of the song is. And how did the metaphor of a crowded room wind up being the main vehicle for exploring that situation?
It was very autobiographical. So I remembered like being at parties with people with this other person and always being asked like,
Who is this?
oh, like when did you guys start dating? We're like, we're not. And then
Or the official story is that we're not.
yeah, like no, neither of us like each other. Like we're just friends. Like that whole kind of situation. But being like in these groups of people and at these like New Year's Eve parties or at dinner parties with his friends, and just like, this is great, this is fun, but I just really want to be with you right now.
Yeah. Stare at me in a crowded room. I want you. So let's leave soon.
Yep. Very literal in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, but that really kind of encapsulates the excitement.
Yeah.
Past tense is another interesting one, and the idea of playing with tense is relevant not just to that, but to Ghost Town too. So Ghost Town, your family loves me, and it's summertime. That's obviously delivered in present tense. Your family loves me, and it's summertime. But 2 years have gone since we've broken up. You left my heart feeling bankrupt. So that's interesting. Are we playing with time there, or does it remain the case that the family, you have a good relationship with the family of the guy?
Yep. So that was kind of the whole of, with that, it was this weird thing where we ended up staying friends. And like Ghost Town was kind of about this like really awkward growing pains of like, we're no longer romantically involved. And when I have a moment of weakness, I come back to you. When you have a moment of weakness, you come back to me, more focusing on him coming back to me in that case, because I had written so many songs of the other way that I was like, we don't need to touch on it in this one. And just like me finally saying like, no, this kind of has to stay as it is, because we're good right now. And we've gone through this like awkwardness of like, we're pretending to be polite. I'm secretly cursing your name, like to my friends, and it's fine. And then past tense kind of moves into this place of, we were just great friends. Everything was fine. Like I fell asleep on my ex-boyfriend on the drive home, but it was completely platonic. But my friends hated that we were still friends. So just like trying to like almost justify it to them, like, okay, yes, all of this horrible stuff happened, but like that's not the case right now.
Yeah. That's, the horrible stuff is in the past tense.
Yep.
And yeah, it's interesting. You fell in love with the version of me you made up in the previous song. To be able to get to a stage where there is real connection and ability to be with one's own brokenness and with the other person's brokenness, and not to like be judging or finding fault, but to be and to enjoy being with the person as they are, as opposed to a version of the person that one has made up. So maybe in the crowded room phase like that, then we're excited and we have lots of ideas about what who the person is. There's a real achievement, I think, to going through, coming out the other side and having meaningful connection where you can fall asleep on the person's shoulder and just be with. It's really, and and I feel like is that kind of being what's being celebrated in past tense?
Yeah, just the fact that like we ended up being friends.
Yeah,
and at the end of the day, like
undervalued, I think, in our culture.
We grew up together in a sense. We spent 6 years together from 17 to 23, which are a little,
a lot of feelings happen for most people in those years.
Those are kind of big years.
Absolutely.
Like just like college, out of college, and just the fact that we were like, let's say the breakup was a little bit messier than it should have been, but I mean, after the dust had settled, we both kind of realized like we are friends at the end of the day, and just because we don't want to be involved with each other on that level doesn't mean it has to be like this weird we can't talk anymore thing.
So speaking of the dust Certainly, that makes me think of the graveyard and the graveyard shift, which again is such a. I'm really curious about this one.
That one, it's a little displaced from the rest of the record.
Yeah, how so?
So I feel like the first 5 songs on the record are like breakup and getting over that hump of like we're just friends, going through the awkwardness, and then that starting to fall in love again, the meeting someone new and being messy with that person who really likes the messy. But then the graveyard shift, that was probably the first song I wrote for this record. But that one was about the loss of, I lost my childhood best friend 2 years ago. And a year later, kind of coming back to that around the anniversary and finally being able to have an emotion other than just straight grief.
Yes, absolutely. I really like the multiple vocals, like there's backing vocals. I think that's the case on a few of the songs.
Yeah.
That's a feature that I think works really well. Could you expand a bit on like deciding when to double up the vocals and any thoughts on that particular feature?
I really like when we double the vocals in areas that I want to add a lot of depth to or make kind of sound a little more eerie. Those are kind of the moments. Michael normally is the one who points out those spaces in post-production, and then we go back in and do more vocals on top of it. Or, you know, I'm probably the person who's the one who's like, okay, right here's where I want it just like completely as stripped as possible. So I think we, in our partnership, kind of like have that good balance with each other where I'm like, we should keep it real low key here, and he's like, here's where we should really build. So we kind of work
very
with each other there.
Yeah, so you know when to have it be like stripped down. He knows when and how to cultivate this fullness. You seem to be a good duo because it has both of those things, and the dynamics are really strong. So, what in the context of the song, what does it mean to take the graveyard shift?
For me, there was a big backstory behind it where there was, before she passed away, there was a lot going on in her life, and she kind of set it up to get justice, I'll say that, with the situation that happened. And she had done so much legwork and, I mean, worked so hard. And for me, it was just like taking the graveyard shift was sharing her story when it came out. And just like never shutting up about it. Like if that's the one thing I can do, like you left the map. And I can make sure everyone who will listen to me knows about it.
Yes. Absolutely. You've got the map, I've got the car running. So there's this commitment and this ongoing collaboration with the friend. Yeah, which is, I think, that's a really powerful way for the record to end with this, again, actually, beyond romantic relationships. We were talking before about the cultivation and maintenance of a friendship with an ex. And here, there is this commitment, this so deep, heartfelt commitment to a past friend. There's, again, a really strong contrast with these situations where we can taught ourselves to be what we assume someone else wants. Here, you fiercely step into being what you want to be and what you correctly perceive the other person would want you to be. And it's the same thing, and it's who you are. And here I am. This is me doing what's necessary and what I feel able to do. So what a perfect note for the record to end on.
I had never really thought of it that way, so I'm glad like you made the connection for me.
Right. Nice. I think it's very common for us to lose ourselves sometimes in relationship with people where we really care about what they perceive about us. That's obviously very common and very human. And we can find ourselves in like becoming who our friends know us to be all along.
Yeah.
That's heartening, I think.
I really, at the end of the day, I wanted it to be a tribute to her and how long we had been friends for, and just to feel like little snapshots back into like the moments that I cherish so much.
Yeah.
And then have that messaging of like, it's been a year, like you've done it. You did what you set out to do.
So in this instance, you have continued the work, again, the metaphor or the idea of like a map being set up, and now you know what to do within that scene. How did the record end? At what stage did you decide to call it Graveyard, and did you decide to put the Graveyard Shift as the closing track?
So that happened towards the end of it, where it was just, the record was originally going to be called Bones, and we had a song that's going to come out on the next one probably, called Bones.
Yeah.
But Michael and I really wanted to get the music out quicker. The record was originally going to be about 12 songs, and we were like, let's cut it, and then release a second one, like almost like a sister album.
Yeah.
So that got decided beginning of September, maybe. And honestly, kind of a mess got finished probably like 3 days before we had to send the record out. So that one, honestly, one song got pulled, that song got put in there. But we just kind of cut it at a place that felt like natural for the flow of the record, because they just keep kind of going more into like these like new relationship love song kind of situation. So we're like, okay, we should break it up a little bit and add in a few songs that aren't breakup songs, so the whole album isn't just like depressing. But the Graveyard Shift, that song was always going to go on there no matter what, because at the end of the day, I did really want it to be about loss, and then kind of coming into that, like, the loss doesn't have to define you.
Yes.
And you can move past it.
Yeah. There's a lot of autonomy at work throughout that song, where it's like it doesn't matter what impediments people put in the way, I am going to come through and complete this work.
Yeah.
And faith as well. You have faith in yourself and in your ability to show up for the friend and for yourself, and be true to yourself and not lie to yourself. The stakes are high, so of course you're not going to lie to yourself, and you are going to come true. So that's really powerful. So, but the song Bones and a bunch of other songs are likely to re-emerge, be reserrected
next year. Yes, sometime.
Can you reveal anything more about the plans for Bones and all the other songs?
I mean, I think the songs just keep, in my opinion, my humble opinion, they just keep kind of getting better.
Yeah.
And I think that's just because, I mean, Michael and I, we just have a lot of fun together. And I feel like I've kind of, over this past year, learned a lot more about myself musically as a writer. So I have, more fun writing now, too, on top of it. But ideally, in my head, they're sister albums. They're going to hold hands in some way.
Yes.
I have a very, dark sense of humor when it comes to things, so I'm always leaning a little bit towards this kind of darker essence in my ideas for records.
Yes.
But then just kind of juxtapositioned by the fact that I am an incredibly sensitive, soft person.
Yes, lovely. Yeah, that's a good combination.
So it'll probably still have that undercurrent.
Yeah, and you're having fun with the songwriting.
Yeah.
So, and I can, with kind of a mess, being the most recent song, then I can all of those components are there, like the darkness, but the having fun, the sensitivity, vulnerability, of course. Even just in writing a song about being a mess, there's there's sensitivity and vulnerability there too. And so I'm excited that perhaps that song points in the direction of the next record.
I would say it definitely is a good indicator of what's going to come next.
Yeah, excellent. In the meantime, look out for the sister album, which
Probably
will be,
a year out.
Yep.
About.
Yep. So hopefully sometime in 2024.
Yes.
I'm excited. Maybe we can reunite and talk about how those songs are holding hands with these ones.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. This has been Back to the City. I'm Simon Calder. Thank you very much for coming in, Anastasia. Thank you for taking the journey with us, viewers. And we'll be back at 10 o'clock next Thursday for another new episode of Back to the City.